Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. In this video we're going to continue reading Prince Caspian, and the chapters we're going to be reading are chapters 9 and 10, and also doing the summaries and the reflections for those chapters as well. If you guys want to listen to the Horse and His Bird podcast episodes, they're on Spotify for podcasters, and the first 3 episodes of Prince Caspian are on there as well as the fourth, and the fifth is also now on YouTube. This is the second video we are doing for today. If you like anything like reading books, listening to music, talking about wrestling, playing computer games, hit the subscribe button. Also, if you can leave a like on this video, it would be very much appreciated. And if you want to know more about when things are coming out on the channel, you can go to Twitter, where the username is the same as the YouTube channel name, except I had to remove S from Tunes, so it's just WrestleReadTune to have that as the username. Instagram is the same thing, WrestleReadTunes. If you want to follow, you can. If you don't, that's fine too. Also, I want to say my laptop decided to black out and shut off completely. So this laptop I'm using right now, I'm borrowing it from someone. I was hot, I was teased, I was upset. I still am those things, but at least I get to use this laptop. Now, into reading the book. Chapter 1, What Lucy Saw. Susan and the 2 boys were bitterly tired with rowing before they rounded the last headland and began the final pull-up Glasswater itself, and Lucy's head ached from the long hours of sun and the glare on the water. Even Trenton longed for the voyage to be over. The seat in which he sat to steer had been made for men, not dwarfs, and his feet did not reach the floorboards, and everyone knows how uncomfortable that is even for 10 minutes. And as they all grew more tired, their spirits fell. Up till now, the children had only been thinking of how to get to Narnia. Now they wonder what they would do when they found them. How to get to Caspian. Now they wonder what they would do when they found him. And how a handful of dwarves and living creatures could defeat an army of grown-up humans. Twilight was coming on as they rode slowly up the windings of Glasswater Creek. Twilight was deepened as the banks drew closer together, and overhanging trees began almost to meet overhead. It was very quiet in here as the sound of the sea died away behind them. They could even hear the trickle of the little streams that poured down from the forest into Glasswater. They were unsure at last, far too tired to attempt lighting a fire, and even a sucker of apples, though most of them felt that they were never going to see an apple again. Seemed better than trying to catch or shoot anything. After a little silent munching, they all huddled down together in the moss, and Greg leaned between 4 large beech trees. Everyone except Lucy went to sleep at once. Lucy, being far less tired, found it hard to get comfortable. Also, she had forgotten till now that all dwarfs snore. She knew that one of the best ways of getting to sleep is to stop trying, so she opened her eyes. They were wrapped in the bracken. She knew that one of the best ways of getting to sleep is to stop trying, so she opened her eyes. Through a gap in the bracken and branches, she could just see a patch of water in the creek and the sky above it. And with a thrill of memory, she saw again. After all those years, bright Narnian stars, she had once known them better than the stars of their own world, because as a queen in Narnia, she had gone to bed much later than as a child in England, and there they were. At least 3 of the summer constellations could be seen from where she lay. The Flip, the Hammer, and the Leopard. Dear old Leopard, she murmured happily to herself. Instead of getting drowsier, she was getting more awake, with an odd, nighttime, dreamish kind of wakefulness. The creek was glowing brighter. She knew now that the moon was on it, though she couldn't see the moon, and now she began to feel that the whole forest was coming awake, like herself. Not knowing why she did it, she got up quickly and walked a little distance away from the river. This is lovely, said Lucy to herself. It was cool and fresh. The richest smells were floating everywhere. Somewhere close by she heard the twitter of a nightingale beginning to sing, then stopping, then beginning again. There was a little light ahead. She went towards the light, and came to a place where there were fewer trees and whole patches or pools of moonlight. But the moonlight and the shadows so mixed that you could hardly be sure where anything was or what it was. At the same moment, the nightingale, satisfied at last with his twinkling up, burst into full song. Lucy's eyes began to grow accustomed to the light, and she saw the trees that were nearest her more distinctly. A great longing for the old days when the trees could talk and Narnia came over them. She knew exactly how each of these trees would talk if only could break them, and what sort of human form it would put on. She looked at a silver birch. It would have a soft, showery voice, and would look like a slender girl with hair blowing about her face, and found it dancing. She looked at the oak. He would be a wizened, heavy old man with a frizzled beard and warts on his face and hands, and hair growing out of the roots. She looked at the beech under which she was standing. Ah, she would be the best of all. She would be a gracious goddess, smooth and stately, the lady of the wood. Oh, trees, 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 said Lucy, though she had not been intending to speak at all. Oh, trees, wake, wake, wake. Don't you remember? Don't you remember me? Dryads and former dryads, come out, come to me. But there was not a breath of wind, they all stared about her. The rustling noise of the leaves was almost like words. The nightingale stopped singing as if to listen to it. Lucy thought that at any moment she would begin to understand what the trees were trying to say, but the moment did not come. The rustling died away. The nightingale resumed its song. Even in the moonlight, the wind looked more ordinary again. Yet Lucy had the feeling as you sometimes have when you're trying to remember a name or a date and almost get it, but it vanishes before you actually do, that she had just missed something, as if she had spoken to the trees a split second too soon or a split second too late, or used all the right words except one, or put in one word that was just wrong. Quite suddenly she began to feel tired. She went back to the bivouac, snuggled down snuggled down between Susan and Peter, and was asleep in a few minutes. It was a cold and cheerless waking for them early next morning, with a grey twilight in the wood, for the sun had not yet risen, and everything dark and dirty. Apples, hi-ho, said Trenton, with a rueful grin. I must say you ancient kings and queens don't overfeed your courtiers. They stood up and shook themselves and looked about. The trees were thick, and they could see no more than a few yards in any direction. I suppose your majesties know the way all right, said the dwarf. I don't, said Susan. I've never seen these woods in my life before. In fact, I thought all along that we ought to have gone by the river, and I think you might have said so at the time, answered Peter, with pardonable sharpness. Oh, don't take any notice of her, said Eddie. She always is a wet blanket. You've got that pocket compass of yours, Peter, haven't you? Well then, we're as right as rain. You've only got to keep on going northwest, cross that little river. What do you call it? The Rush? I know, said Peter. The one that joins the big river at the fords of Barina, or Barina's Bridge, as the DLF calls it. That's right. Cross it and strike uphill, and we'll be at the stone table. How's Lions High? I mean, like 8 or 9 o'clock. I hope King Caspian will give us a good breakfast. I hope you're right, said Susan. I can't remember all that at all. That's the worst of girls, said Eddie to Peter and the dwarf. They never carry a map in their heads. That's because our heads have something inside them, said Lucy. At first things seem to be going pretty well. They even thought they struck an old pond. But if you know anything about woods, you will know that one is always finding imaginary paths. They disappear after about 5 minutes, and then you think you have found another, and hope it is not another, but the same one, and it also disappears. And after you have been well run out of the right direction, you realize that none of them were paths at all. Those in the grove were used to woods, and were not taking them for more than a few seconds. They had plodded on for about half an hour, three of them very stiff from yesterday's run, when Trumpkin suddenly whispered, "Stop!" They all stopped. There's something following us, he said in a low voice, or rather, something keeping up with us, over there on the left. They all stood still, listening and staring till their ears and eyes ached. You and I better each have an arrow on the string, said Susan to Trumpkin. The dwarf nodded, and when both bows were ready for action, the party went on again. They went a few dozen yards through fairly open woodland, keeping in front with that. Then they came to a place where the undergrowth thickened, and they had to pass nearer to it. Just as they were passing the place, there came a sudden something that snarled and flashed, rising out from the breaking twigs like a thunderbolt. Lucy was knocked down and wounded, hearing the twirling of the bowstring as she fell. When she was able to take notice of things again, she saw a great gray-looking gray bear lying dead with Trumpkin's arrow on its side. "You know I beat you in that shooting match, Sue," said Peter, with a slightly forced smile. Even he had been shaken by this adventure. I I left it too late," said Susan, in an embarrassed voice. "I was so afraid it might be, one of our kind of bears, a talking bear. She hated killing things." "That's the trouble of it," said Trenton. "When most of the beasts have gone enemy and gone dumb, there's still some of the other kind left. You never know, and we can't wait to see." "Poor old man," said Susan. "You don't think he was?" "Not he," said the dwarf. "I saw the face and I heard the snarl. He only wanted little dinner for his breakfast. And talking of breakfast, I didn't want to discourage your majesties when you said you hoped King Caspian would give you a good one. But meat's precious scarce in camp, and there's good eating on a bear. It would be a shame to leave the carcass without taking a bit, and it won't delay us more than half an hour. I dare say you two youngsters, kings I should say, know how to skin a bear. Let's go and sit down a fair way off," said Susan to Lucy. "I know what a horrid, messy business that will be." Lucy shuddered and nodded. When they had sat down, she said, "Such a horrible idea has come into my head, Sue." "What's that?" "Wouldn't it be dreadful if some day in our own world at home, men started going wild inside, like the animals here, and still looked like men? So that you never know which were which? We've got enough to bother about here and now in Narnia," said the practical Susan, "without imagining things like that." They rejoined the boys in the door. As much as they thought they could carry the best meat had been cut off. Raw meat is not a nice thing to fill one's pockets with, but they folded it up in fresh leaves and made the best of it. They had experienced enough to know that they would feel quite differently about these squashy and unpleasant parcels when they had walked long enough to be very hungry. On they trudged again, stopping to wash 3 pairs of hands that needed it in the first stream they passed, until the sun rose and the birds began to sing. The butterflies then they wanted were buzzing in the garden. The stiffness from yesterday's rowing began to wear off. Everybody's spirits rose. The sun grew warmer, and they took their helmets off and carried them. "I suppose we're going right," said Edmund, about an hour later. "I don't see how we can go wrong, as long as we don't bear too much to the left," said Peter. "If we bear too much to the right, the worst that can happen is wasting a little time by striking the great river too soon, and not cutting off the clearing." And then they trudged on with no sound, except the thud of their feet and the jingle of their chained shirts. "Where's this Barley Rush got to?" said Edmund a good deal later. "I certainly thought we'd have struck it by now," said Peter. "But there's nothing to do but keep on." They both knew that the dwarf was looking anxiously at them, but he said nothing. And still they trudged on, and their nailed shirts began to feel very hot and heavy. "Where on earth," said Peter suddenly. They had come, without seeing it, almost to the edge of a small precipice, from which they looked down into a gorge with a river at the bottom. On the far side the cliffs rose much higher. None of the party, except Edmund and perhaps Trumpkin, was a rock climber. "I'm sorry," said Peter. "It's my fault for coming this way. We're lost. I've never seen this place in my life before." The dwarf gave a low whistle between his teeth. "Oh, do let's go back and go the other way," said Susan. I knew all along we'd get lost in these woods." "Susan," said Lucy reproachfully, "don't nag at Peter like that. It's so rotten, and he's doing all he can." "And don't you snap at Sue like that either," said Edmund. "I think she's quite right." "Togs and cells," exclaimed Trumpkin. "If we got lost coming, what chance have we of finding our way back? If we were to go back to the island and begin all over again, even supposing we could, we might as well give the whole thing up. You realize we're finished with Caspian before we get there at that rate. You think we ought to go on, said Lucy. I'm not sure the High King is lost, said Trumpkin. What's to hinder this river being a rush? Because the rush is not in the gorge, said Peter, keeping his temper with some difficulty. Your Majesty says is, replied the dwarf. Aren't you to say was? You knew this country hundreds, maybe 1,000 years ago. It may have changed. A landslide may have pulled off half the side of that hill, leaving bare rock, and there are your precipices beyond the gorge. And the rush might go on, deepening its course year after year, so you get the little precipice this side, or there might have been an earthquake or anything. I never thought of that, said Peter. And anyway, continued Trumpkin, even if this is not the rush, it's flowing roughly north, and so it must fall into the great river anyway. I think I passed something that might have been it on my way down. So if we go downstream for a right, we'll hit the great river. Perhaps not so high as we'd hoped. At least we'll be no worse off than if you'd come my way. Trumpkin, you're correct, said Peter. Come on then, down the side of the gorge. Look, cried Lucy. Where, said Edmund. The lion, said Lucy. Aslan himself, didn't you see? Her face had changed completely, and her eyes shone. Do you actually mean, began Peter. Where do you think you saw him? Asked Susan. Don't talk like a grown-up, said Lucy, stamping her foot. I didn't think I saw him. I saw him. Where, Lou? Asked Peter. Right up there between those mountain ashes. No, this side of the gorge and up, not down. Just opposite of the way you want to go. And he wanted us to go where he was, up there. How do you know that was what he wanted? Asked Edwin. He, I just know, said Lucy, by his face. The others all looked at each other in puzzled silence. Her Majesty may well have seen a lion, put in Shrinkin. There are lions in these woods, I've been told. But it needn't have been a friendly and talking lion any more than the bear was a friendly and talking bear. Oh, don't be so stupid, said Lucy. Do you think I don't know Aslan when I see him? He'd be a pretty elderly lion by now, said Trumpkin. If he's one you knew when you were here before, and if it could be the same one, what's to prevent him having gone wild and witless like so many others? Lucy turned crimson, and I think she would have flown at Trumpkin if Peter had not laid his hand on her arm. The DRF doesn't understand. How could he? You must just take it, Trumpkin, that we do really know about Aslan. A little bit about him, I mean. And we mustn't talk about him like that again. He isn't lucky for one thing, and it's all nonsense for another. The only question is whether Aslan is actually there. But I know he was, said Lucy, her eyes filling with tears. Yes, Lou, but we don't, you see, said Peter. There's nothing for it but a vote, said Edmund. All right, replied Peter. You're the eldest, DRF. What do you vote for? Up or down? Down, said the dwarf. I know nothing about Aslan, but I do know that if we turn left and follow the gorge up, it might lead us all day before we find a place where we could cross it. Whereas if we turn right and go down, we're bound to reach the great river in about a couple of hours. And if there are any actual lions about, we want to go away from them, not towards them. What do you say, Susan? Don't be angry, Lou, said Susan, but I do think we should go down. I'm dead tired. Do let's get out of this wretched wood into the open as quick as we can. And none of us except you saw anything. Edmund, said Peter. Well, there's just this, said Edmund, speaking quickly and turning a little red. When we first discovered Narnia a year ago, or 1,000 years ago, well, whichever it was Lucy who discovered it first, and none of us would believe her. I was the worst of the lot, I know. Yet she was right after all. Wouldn't it be fair to believe her this time? I'd vote for going up. Oh, Ed, said Lucy and seized his hand. And now it's your turn, Peter, said Susan. And I do hope. Oh, shut up, and let a chap think, interrupted Peter. I'd much rather not have to vote. You're the High King, said Trumpkin sternly. Down, said Peter, after a long pause. I know Lucy may be right after all, but I can't help it. We must do one or the other. So they set off to their right along the ledge, downstream, and Lucy turned around to the plane, cried bitterly. Chapter 10. The Return of the Lion. To get along the edge of the gorge was not so easy as it had looked. Before they had gone many yards, they were confronted with young fir woods growing on the very edge, and after they had tried to go through these, stooping and pushing for about 10 minutes, they realized that in there it would take them an hour to do half a mile. So they came back and out again and decided to go around the farm. This took them much farther to their right than they wanted to go, far out of sight of the cliffs and out of sound of the river, so they began to be afraid they had lost it altogether. Nobody knew the time, but it was getting to the hottest part of the day. When they were able at last to go back to the edge of the gorge, nearly a mile below the point from which they had started, they found the cliffs on their side of it a good deal lower and more broken. Soon they found a way down into the gorge and continued the journey at the river's edge. But first they had a rest and a long drink. No one was talking any more about breakfast, even dinner with Caspian. It may have been wise to stick to the left instead of going along the top. It kept them sure of their direction, and ever since the failure wood, they had all been afraid of being forced too far out of their course or losing themselves in the woods. It was an old and pathless forest, but we could not keep anything like a straight course in it. Patches of hopeless brambles, fallen trees, boggy places, and dense undergrowth would be always getting in the way. But the gorge in the ranch was not at all a nice place for traveling either. I mean, it was not a nice place for people in a hurry. For an afternoon's ramble ending in a picnic tree, it would have been delightful. It was everything you could want on an occasion of that sort. Grumbling waterfalls, silver cascades, deep amber-colored pools, mossy rocks, and deep moss on the banks on which you could sink over your ankles. Every kind of fern, jewel, like dragonflies, sometimes a hawk overhead, and once, Peter and Trumpkin both thought, an eagle. Of course, what the children in the dwarf wanted to see as soon as possible was the great river below them and the river and the way as lions now. As they went on, the rush began to fall more and more steeply. The journey became more and more to climb and less of a walk. In places, even a dangerous climb over slippery rock, with a nasty drop into dark chasms, and the river roaring angrily at the bottom. You may be sure they watched the cliffs on their left, eagerly for any sign of a break, any place where they could climb them. Those cliffs remained cruel. It was maddening, because everyone knew that if once they were out of the gorge on that side, there was only a smooth slope and a fairly short walk to Caspian's headquarters. The boys and the dwarfs, boy, boys and the dwarf went out in favor of lighting a fire and cooking their bear meat. Susan didn't want this. She only wanted, as she said, to get on and finish it and get out of these beastly woods. Lucy was far too tired and miserable to have any opinion about anything, and as there was no dry wood to be had, it mattered very little what anyone thought. The boys began to wonder if raw meat was really as nasty as they had always been told. Trumpkin assured them it was. Of course, if the children had attempted a journey like this a few days ago in England, they would have been knocked up. I think I've explained before how Narnia was altering them. Even Lucy was by now, so to speak, only one-third of a little girl going to boarding school for the first time, and two-thirds of Queen Lucy of Narnia. At last, said Susan. Oh, hooray, said Peter. The little girls had just made a bend, and the whole view spread out beneath them. They could see open country stretching before them to the horizon, and between it and them, the broad silver ribbon of the great river. You could see the especially broad and shallow place which had once been the forge of Marina, was now spanned by a long, many-arched bridge. There was a little town at the far end of it. By Jove, said Edmund, we fought the battle of Marina, just where that town is. This thrilled the boys more than anything. You can't help feeling stronger when you look at a place where you won a glorious victory, not to mention a kingdom, hundreds of years ago. Peter and Eddie were soon so busy talking about the battle, they forgot their sore feet and the heavy drag of their narrow shirts on their shoulders. The dwarf was interested too. They were all getting on at a quicker pace now. The going became easier, though there were still sheer cliffs on their left. The ground was becoming lower on their right. Soon it was no longer a gorge at all, only a valley. There were no more waterfalls, and presently they were in fairly thick woods again. Then, all at once, whiz, and a sound rather like the stroke of a woodpecker. The children were still wondering where ages ago they had heard a sound just like that, and why they disliked it so. When Trumpkin shouted down at the same moment, forcing Lucy, who happened to be next to him, flat down into the bracken. Peter, who had been looking to see if he could spot a squirrel, had seen what it was. A long, cruel arrow had sunk into a tree trunk just above his head. As he pulled Susan down and dropped himself, another came rasping over his shoulder and struck the ground at his side. Quick, quick, get back, crawl, panted Trumpkin. They turned and wriggled along uphill into the bracken amid clouds of wiggly, buzzing flies. Arrows whizzed around them. One struck Susan's helmet with a sharp pain and glanced off. They crawled quicker. Sweat poured off them. Then they ran, stooping nearly double. Boys held their swords in their hands for fear they would trip them up. It was heartbreaking work. Uphill again, back over the ground they had already traveled. When they felt that they had actually couldn't run any more, even to save their lives, they all dropped down in the damp moss beside a waterfall and behind a big boulder. Panted, they were surprised to see how high they had already got. They listened intently and gave no sign of pursuit. So that's all right, said Trumpkin, drawing a deep breath. They're not searching the wood, only sentries, I expect. It means that Miraz has an outpost down there, bottles and bottle brewers. Though it was a near thing. I'd had my head smacked for bringing us this way at all, said Peter. On the contrary, your majesty, said the dwarf. For one thing, it wasn't you. It was your royal brother, King Edmund, who first suggested going by glass water. I'm afraid the DLF's right, said Edmund. We've quite honestly forgotten this ever since things began going wrong. And for another, continued Trumpkin, if we'd gone my way, we'd have walked straight into that new outpost most likely. At least had just the same trouble of waiting. I think this glass water route has turned out for the best. A blessing in disguise, said Susan. Some disguise, said Edmund. I suppose we'll have to go right up the gorge again now, said Lucy. You're a hero, said Peter. That's the nearest we got to today to saying I told you so. Let's get on. And as soon as we're well up into the flame, said Trumpkin, whatever anyone says, I'm going to light a fire and cook supper. But we must get well away from here. There's no need to describe how they toiled back up the gorge. It was pretty hard work. Oddly enough, everyone felt more cheerful. They were getting their second wind, and the bird's supper had a wonderful effect. They reached the full wood, which had caused them so much trouble while it was still daylight, and bivouacked in a hollow just above it. It was tedious gathering the firewood, but it was grand when the fire blazed up, and they began producing the damp and smeary parcels of bear meat, which would have been so very unattractive to anyone who expected to be indoors. The dwarf had splendid ideas about cookery. Each apple they still had a few of these was wrapped up in bear's meat, as if it was to be apple dumpling with meat instead of pastry, only much thicker, and spiked on a sharp stick, and then roasted. And the juice of the apple worked all through the meat, like applesauce with roast pork. Beardas lived too much on other animals and not being nice, but Beardas had plenty of honey and food as extra, and this turned out to be that sort of bear. It was a truly glorious meal, and of course no washing up, only lying back and watching the smoke from Trumpkin's pipe and stretching one's tired legs and chatting. Everyone felt quite hopeful now about finding King Caspian tomorrow, and was even realized in a few days. It may not have been sensible of them to feel like this, but they did. They dropped off to sleep one by one, all pretty quickly. Lucy woke out of the deepest sleep you can imagine. Though she thought it was Peter's voice, that did not seem to fit either. She did not want to get up, not because she was still tired. On the contrary, she was wonderfully rested, and all the aches had gone from her bones. Because she felt so extremely happy and comfortable, she was looking straight up at the Narnia moon, which is larger than ours, and at the starry sky, in a place where their bivouac was comparatively open. Lucy came the call again, neither her father's voice nor Peter's. She sat up, trembling with excitement, but not with fear. The moon was so bright that the whole forest landscape around her was almost as clear as day, though it looked wilder. Behind her was the fair wood, the ridge on the right, the jagged cliff tops on the far side of the gorge, straight ahead. Open grass to where a glade of trees began about a bow shot away. Lucy looked very hard at the trees of that glade. "Why, I do believe they're moving," she said to herself. "They're walking about." She got up, her heart beating wildly, and walked towards them. There was suddenly a noise in the glade, a noise such as trees make in a quiet wind. Though there was no wind tonight, yet it was not exactly an ordinary tree noise either. Lucy felt there was a tune in it, but she could not catch the tune any more than she had been able to catch the words when the trees had so nearly talked to her the night before. But there was at least a lilt. She felt her own feet willing to dance as she got nearer, and now there was no doubt that the trees were actually moving in and out from one another as if in a complicated country dance. And I suppose, thought Lucy, when trees dance, it must be a very, very country dance indeed. She was almost among them now. The first thing she looked at seemed at first glance to not be a tree at all, but a huge man with a shaggy beard and great bushes of hair. She was not frightened. She had seen such things before. When she looked again, he was only a tree, though he was still moving. You couldn't see whether he had foot or roots, of course, because when trees move, they don't walk on the surface of the earth. They wade in as we do in water. The same thing happened with every tree she looked at. At one moment, they seemed to be the friendly, lovely giant and giantess forms which the tree people put on when some good magic has called them into full life. Next moment, they all look like trees again. When they look like trees, it was like strangely human trees, and when they look like people, it was like strangely branchy and leafy people. And all the time, a queer, lilting, rustling, clear, merry noise. They're almost awake. Not quite, said Lucy. She knew she herself was wide awake, wider than anyone in years or years. She went fearlessly in among them, dancing herself as she leaped this way and back to avoid being run into by these huge partners. But she was only half interested in them. She wanted to get beyond them to something else. It was from beyond them that the dear voice had come. She soon got through them, half wondering whether she had been using her arms to push branches aside, or to take hands in a great chain with big dancers who stooped to reach her, for there were actually rows of trees around the central open place. She stepped out from among their shifting confusion of lovely lights and shadows. A circle of grass, smooth as a lawn, met her eyes, with dark trees dancing all around it. And then, oh joy, for he was there, a huge lion shining white in the moonlight, with his huge black shadow underneath him. But from the movement of his tail, he might have been a stone lion. Lucy never thought of that. She never stopped to think whether he was a friendly lion or not. She rushed at him. She felt her heart. She felt her heart would burst if she lost a moment. The next thing she knew was that she was kissing him and putting her arms as far around his neck as she could, and blowing on her face in the beautiful, rich silkness of his name. Aslan, Aslan, dear Aslan, sobbed Lucy. At last, the great beast rolled over on his side so that Lucy fell, half sitting and half lying between his front paws. He bent forward and just touched her nose with his tongue. His warm breath came all around her. She gazed up into the large, wise face. "Welcome, child," he said. "Aslan," said Lucy. "You're bigger. That is because you are older, little one," answered he. "Not because you are. I am not. But every year you grow, you will find me bigger." For a time she was so happy that she did not want to speak. But Aslan spoke. "Lucy," he said, He must not lie here for long. We have work in hand, and much time has been lost today. Yes, wasn't it a shame, said Lucy. I saw you all right. They wouldn't believe me. But also, from somewhere deep inside Aslan's body, there came the faintest suggestion of a growl. I'm sorry, said Lucy, who understood some of his moods. I didn't mean to start slandering the others, but it wasn't my fault anyways, was it? The lion looked straight into her eyes. How's that? Said Lucy. You don't mean it was. How could I? I couldn't have left the others and come to you alone. How could I? Don't look at me like that. Oh, well, I suppose I could. Yes, and it wouldn't have been alone. I know not if I was with you. What would have been the good? Husband said nothing. You mean, said Lucy rather faintly, and it would have turned out all right somehow. But how? Please, Aslan, am I not to know? To know what would have happened, child? Said Aslan. No, nobody has ever told that. Oh dear, said Lucy. Anyone can find out what will happen, said Aslan. If you go back to the others now and wake them up and tell them you have seen me again, and that you must all get up at once and follow me, what will happen? There's only one way of finding out. Do you mean that is what you want me to do? Gasped Lucy. Yes, little one, said Aslan. Will the others see you too? Asked Lucy. Certainly not at first, said Aslan. Later on, it depends. But they won't believe me, said Lucy. It doesn't matter, said Aslan. Oh dear, said Lucy. And I was so pleased at finding you again. And I thought you'd let me stay. And I thought you'd come roaring in and frighten all the enemies away like last time. And now everything was going to be perfect. It is hard for you, little one, said Aslan. Things never happen the same way twice. It has been hard for us all in Narnia before now. Lucy buried her head in his mane to hide from his face. But there must have been magic in his mane. She could feel a lion's strength going into her. Quite suddenly, she sat up. I'm sorry, Aslan, she said. I'm ready now. Now you are a lioness, said Aslan. And now all Narnia will be renewed. Let's come. We have no time to lose. He got up and walked with stately, noisy paces back to the belt of dancing trees in which he had just come, and Lucy went with him, laying a rather tremulous hand on his mane. The trees pointed to let them through, and for one second assumed their human forms completely. Lucy had a glimpse of tall and lovely Greek gods and Greek goddesses all bowing to the lion. Next moment there were trees again, but still bowing, with such graceful sweeps of branch and trunk that their bowing was itself a kind of dance. Now, child, said Aslan, when they left the trees behind them, I will wait here. Go and wake the others and tell them to follow. If they will not, then you at least must follow me alone. It is a terrible thing to have to wake four people who are older than yourself and all very tired, for the purpose of telling them something they probably don't believe and making them do something they certainly won't like. I mustn't think about it. I must just do it, thought Lucy. She went to Peter first and shook him. Peter, she whispered in his ear, wake up, quick. Aslan is here. He says we've got to follow him at once. Certainly, Lou, whatever you like, said Peter unexpectedly. This was encouraging, but as Peter instantly rolled around and went to sleep again, it wasn't much use. Then she tried Susan. Susan did actually wake up, only to say in her most annoying grown-up voice, You've been dreaming, Lucy. Go to sleep again. She tackled Edmund next. It was very difficult to wake him, but when at last she had done it, he was actually awake and sat up. Huh? He said in a grumpy voice. What are you talking about? She said it all over again. This was one of the worst parts of her job, for each time she said it, it sounded less convincing. Aslan, said Edmund, jumping up. Hurry! Where? Lucy turned back to where she could see the man waiting, his patient eyes fixed upon her. There, she said. Where? Asked Edmund again. There. Don't you see? Just this side of the trees. Edmund stared hard for a while and then said, No, there's nothing there. You've got dazzled and muddled with the moonlight. One does, you know. I thought I saw something for a moment myself. It's only an optical, what do you call it? I can see him all the time, said Lucy. He's looking straight at us. And why can't I see him? He said you might be able to. Why? I don't know. That's what he said. Oh, bother it all, said Edmund. I do wish you wouldn't keep on seeing things, but I suppose we'll have to wake the others. And now, on to the reflection and the rest of the chapter summaries and reflections for chapters 9 and 10. And, yeah. Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy race fast as they can until they go no further than one and then enter into the forest. As they get ready to go to sleep for the night, Lucy lays awake, looking at the stars. She unexpectedly, even to herself, gets up and listens to a nightingale sing. She calls out to the trees and tells them to awaken, but a rustle of leaves is the only response. The next day, they all continue their march through the woods, hoping to reach the river Rush, which would show them that they are moving in the correct direction towards Alzheimer's Town. During the march, Chunkin alerts them that they are being followed. Suddenly, Chunkin uses his bow and arrow to shoot a bear that came charging through the woods. Everyone was frightened. They grab when Chunkin verifies that it was not a talking bear. Chunkin, Peter, and Edmund then take meat from the bear to eat later. Eventually, the party reaches the river, but Peter is dismayed. He doesn't recognize it. Chunkin explains that it probably still is the river Rush, but Peter doesn't recognize it because it looks different than hundreds or thousands of years ago. Peter realizes that Chunkin is correct, and they decide to go north/down toward the river. Suddenly, Lucy shouts that she has seen Aslan, and Aslan wants them to go to the opposite way. Everyone has different levels of doubt. Chunkin, the most doubtful, put to a vote. Chunkin and Susan say that they should stick to the original plan, while Lucy and Edmund want to go any direction based on Lucy's vision. Peter is the tiebreaker, and he says they should stick to the original plan. And that's the reflection for chapter 9. This is one of those really rich chapters. There's a lot of great material here for discussion, and this is a bit refreshing since I've been feeling that Prince Caspian has actually been the least discussable book in the Chronicles of the Narnia franchise so far. With that said, I've got at least two great quotations in mind to discuss. Here's the first, which occurs soon after Trumpkin shoots the charging bear. Lucy is reflecting upon what has just occurred and the fact that many of the talking beasts just referred to the wild forms. Here's the short conversation. Wouldn't it be dreadful if someday in a lame world at home, men started going wild inside, like the animals here, and still look like men, so that you never know which were which? You've got enough to bother about here and now in Narnia, said the practical Susan, without imagining things like that. That was from page 253. Oh, what an excellent quotation. C.S. Lewis couldn't be talking about something like the Holocaust now, could he? Yes, that's exactly what I think he's doing. Either that or this is a very thoughtful insight into the impending zombie apocalypse. And more likely than not, this is simultaneously a sorrowful reflection on the past, where genocide murdered humans acting like animal behavior, and a cautionary tale about the future. As an adult reader, it was clear that Susan is in danger here. To dismiss Lucy's comment as silly was something young. The remedy of imagining is to dismiss its possibility entirely. And that, my friends, is both worrisome and rather typical of what we do if we want to repeat the parts of history that we most regret. Onward to the next great passage in this chapter. Here we learn with great joy and enthusiasm that Edmund is a bigger person than we ever thought possible. This quotation occurs during the vote. To follow Lucy's vision of Aslan and to continue down the current path. Well, it was just this, said Edmund, speaking quickly and finding a little red. When we first discovered Narnia a year ago, 1,000 years ago, whichever it is, it was Lucy who discovered it first, and none of us would believe her. I was the worst of them all. I know. Yes, she was right after all. Wouldn't it be fair to believe her this time? I vote for getting up. That's on page 255. Bravo, Edmund. Once again, We have reaffirmation that Edmund has very much learned his lesson. This is not the Edmund from the beginning of the line of original religion. This Edmund has come so far that he now understands the importance of believing his system. Why? Because he was right last time. And not only was Lucy right last time, but Edmund knows the consequences of doubting her. Lucy is not one who lies, and Edmund knows this. But this time, the vote has gone against Lucy and Edmund. Something, Peter, Susan, outvoted 3-2. Now it's time to see the consequences of doubting Lucy again. And into the summary for chapter 10. The chapter opens with Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy following the river rush toward the great river. The measuring point is the front of the arena. They climb downward toward the river and travel all day. Finally, they reach the forge, but as they do, arrows are shot at them. The 5 of them crouch low and run through the forest, escaping the arrows and several close calls. They stop and fair red for the evening and eat the candy that they had collected the day before. After they all fall asleep, Lucy awakens to the sound of a voice calling her name. She gets up and sees that the trees around her are nearly awake. They are doing a dance, and at times appear almost human. She continues through the yielding trees until she comes to a clearing, where she finds Aslan. Lucy notes that Aslan is bigger, and tells her that this is because she is bigger as well. Aslan makes it clear to her that she could certainly have followed him the day before, despite the reservations of her siblings and Trumpkin. Aslan tells Lucy that there is no way for her to know what would have happened if she had done so. Aslan tells Lucy that her objective now is to go immediately to her siblings, wake them, and tell them that they must follow him. Aslan says that her siblings may not be able to see him immediately, but might eventually. Lucy reluctantly and nervously goes to wake each of her siblings. She tries Peter and Susan first, without luck, and she wakes Edmund, who is unable to see Aslan, who is standing nearby. Edmund says that he wishes he would stop seeing things, but that they should probably wake Peter and Susan anyway. To answer the reflection. This is a very interesting chapter. In my opinion, here we have numerous lessons in faith. Already in the last chapter, we see Peter, Susan, and Trumpkin reject Lucy's claim that she has seen Aslan, and that he wants them to go a different direction. Not only do Peter, Susan, and Trumpkin fail in their faith in Aslan, Aslan makes it very clear that Lucy's faith wavered as well. Lucy could have easily gone to Aslan on her own, despite the protests of her siblings. In fact, this was the preferred option, and exactly what Aslan had planned. Instead, because of Lucy's decision to go along with her siblings, they'll have to move to Plan B. Plan B is even more risky. Now Lucy has to wake up her siblings in the middle of the night after a rather difficult day of walking and running, only to tell them that the invisible Aslan is here and that they must follow him immediately. This is a huge lesson in faith, again, for everyone. It is a lesson in faith for Lucy, who knows that it is a terrible thing to have to wait for people older than yourself, and they are very tired for the purpose of telling them something they probably won't believe, and making them do something they certainly won't like. That's on page 260. Likewise, it will surely be a lesson in faith for the others, who will have to either follow Lucy, or worse, let her go off on her own, which she was sure to do this time if her siblings reject her. Funny enough, this is now bringing back some memories of the last time I read Prince Caspian, because if I recall how the rest of the story progresses, it will be a pretty neat demonstration of what faith here in Aslan can and cannot do, and it differs from one character to another. There is indeed a good reason that only Lucy can currently see Aslan, and I suspect that the reason is that her faith in him is currently strongest, perhaps not as strong as the last time she was in Narnia, but still stronger than her siblings, and certainly stronger than Shrunken. It would be interesting to see what C.S. Lewis does from this point onward with the concept of faith, but it is clearly going to be very thoroughly addressed. After all, even the trees are beginning to show their faith as they awaken to the presence of Aslan's return to their woods. We will see what the consequences are of delayed or absent faith as Lucy's siblings come to remember, to believe in Aslan once again. And that is the end of the summaries and reflections to chapters 9 and 10. So, yeah. So if you like anything like reading books, listening to music, talking about wrestling, playing computer games, then click the subscribe button. Also, if you can leave a like on this video, it would be very much appreciated. Also, I'm going to try and release the next listening to the band's Red songs at Not Heard from End of Silence. I don't know when it will get recorded, as well as the next episode of Reading Prince Caspian, but when they do get recorded, those videos are coming soon. So, yeah, uh, I think that's it. Bye.